On April 8, 1943, 27,000 feet above the war-torn landscape of Comines, France, Oberleutnant Rolf Herrnichen of Jagdgeschwader 26 allowed himself a fleeting, smug grin. Through the pristine canopy of his Focke-Wulf 190A5, he observed a series of ungainly silhouettes laboriously clawing their way skyward, struggling to join his formation. These were American fighters, making their baptism of fire over occupied Europe, and to Herrnichen, they were a joke. "The armies have sent us flying milk bottles," he transmitted, a sneer audible even over the radio, as he watched the massive Republic P-47 Thunderbolts wrestle with altitude. Below, a tight formation of 16 P-47C Thunderbolts from the 4th Fighter Group groaned upwards. Their immense 2,000-horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engines shrieked in protest against the 7-ton Leviathans they propelled. To German pilots, whose eyes were accustomed to the lithe grace of Spitfires and the agile ferocity of Soviet fighters, these corpulent American machines appeared almost farcical. Barrel-shaped fuselages, bulbous greenhouse canopies, wings that seemed ludicrously undersized for their bulky bodies, and propellers that dwarfed anything in the Luftwaffe's arsenal. What Herrnichen, and indeed none of the German aces circling like predatory wolves above could have possibly conceived, was that they were witnessing the ominous arrival of the weapon destined to systematically dismantle the Luftwaffe's once vaunted fighter arm. Within a mere 18 months, these derided flying milk bottles would shed their comical image, transforming into instruments of sheer terror. Their 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns would become the most chilling sound in German skies, a harbinger of death. The cold, unfeeling mathematics of destruction were already loaded within those broad wings. 3,400 rounds of ammunition, a combined rate of fire of 6,000 rounds per minute, enough concentrated firepower to cleave a Messerschmitt in half in less than 2 seconds. The profound transformation began that fateful April morning when Major Donald Blakesley, commanding the 335th Fighter Squadron, recognized the German formation positioning for attack. This former Eagle Squadron veteran, who had traded his RAF Spitfire for a Thunderbolt just weeks prior, instinctively grasped a truth his men had yet to learn. Survival in the P-47 demanded a radical unlearning of every conventional aerial combat doctrine. The Thunderbolt represented a stark philosophical departure from traditional fighter design. While German engineers relentlessly pursued lightweight interceptors optimized for rapid climb and tight turning circles, Republic aviation had forged something unprecedented, a high-altitude juggernaut that redefined the very tenets of aerial warfare through sheer mass, overwhelming power, and unparalleled firepower. Among the 56 American pilots scattered across the French sky that morning were men destined for legend, future aces whose names would soon evoke primal fear in the hearts of Luftwaffe fighter pilots. But on April 8, 1943, they were raw novices in an untested machine, squaring off against the most seasoned and battle-hardened fighter force in the world. The Germans had been locked in continuous combat since 1939, boasting veterans forged in the brutal skies over Poland, France, Britain, and Russia. The Americans, by stark contrast, had been in combat for precisely 0 days. This is the compelling saga of how relentless industrial logic ultimately triumphed over tactical brilliance, how an unparalleled fusion of quantity and quality coalesced into an overwhelming, unstoppable superiority, and how the initial mocking laughter of German pilots curdled into abject terror as they discovered the devastating truth of what synchronized Browning machine guns could wreak upon an aircraft at 400 yards.
The genesis of the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt sprang from the urgent, almost panicked demands of June 1940. As German fighters swept across the collapsing French landscape, Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's brilliant Georgian-born chief designer, received desperate specifications from the U.S. Army Air Corps. An immediate need for a high-altitude interceptor capable of standing toe-to-toe with the Luftwaffe's finest. What Kartveli conceived and delivered instead was an absolute monster, a machine that boldly redefined the boundaries of aeronautical possibility. "It will be a dinosaur," Kartveli reportedly conceded to his design team, a wry smile playing on his lips, "but it will be a dinosaur with good proportions." The XP-47B prototype, which first roared to life on May 6, 1941, astonished all who beheld it. At an astonishing 9,900 pounds empty, it dwarfed its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer, by a staggering 65% in weight. Its colossal turbo-supercharger system, with its labyrinthine ducting snaking through the rear fuselage, lent it an almost ungainly pregnant appearance. Test pilots, encountering this behemoth for the first time, invariably posed the same incredulous question: "This thing actually flies?" Not only did it fly, but it soared with a ferocity and capability unmatched at high altitudes. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, an 18-cylinder radio beast churning out 2,000 horsepower, could maintain its full formidable power at 27,000 feet, an altitude where even the most potent German fighters would gasp for thin air. The innovative turbo supercharger, fed by scorching exhaust gases, miraculously delivered sea-level performance in the frigid, rarefied stratosphere, a domain where conventional superchargers simply choked and failed. Major Hubert "Hub" Zemke, the commander of the 56th Fighter Group, then undergoing rigorous training at Bridgeport, Connecticut, initially harbored an intense dislike for the aircraft. His unit suffered a grim toll, losing 18 pilots and 41 aircraft in a harrowing series of training accidents between September 1942 and January 1943. The P-47, ironically, claimed more American lives in training than German pilots would during its initial months in combat. It was a brutal beast to master, prone to ground looping on landing, notorious for torque rolling violently on takeoff, and possessing a terrifying enthusiasm for diving that led pilots to discover the chilling phenomenon of compressibility, where their controls would seize as shockwaves contorted the wings. Yet those who persevered and mastered its fierce temperament unearthed something truly extraordinary. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a stoic farm boy from Oklahoma who would ascend to become one of America's preeminent aces with 27 victories, vividly recalled his inaugural flight. "It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The power was unbelievable. You didn't fly it, you aimed it."
The initial combat clashes in April and May 1943 seemed to validate every German prejudice. The P-47s, in those early engagements, proved utterly incapable of outturning the agile Focke-Wulf 190s, could not match the climbing prowess of the Messerschmitt 109s, and simply lacked their nimble handling characteristics at medium altitudes. Luftwaffe pilots swiftly honed tactics to ruthlessly exploit these perceived weaknesses, launching lightning-fast attacks from below where the heavy Thunderbolts floundered, or deliberately forcing turning fights where agility was paramount and brute firepower seemed irrelevant. Hauptmann Josef Pips Priller, the commanding officer of Jagdgeschwader 26, conveyed a report to headquarters brimming with dismissive confidence after his first encounter. "The new American fighter is meat for the slaughter. It flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow. Our boys are calling them Indianer, fat targets pretending to be warriors." The grim statistics of the early weeks appeared to corroborate German hubris. In their maiden month of operations, American fighter groups tragically lost 14 Thunderbolts, while tallying a mere 3 confirmed German kills. The RAF, observing these struggles from their Spitfire squadrons, quietly, perhaps patronizingly, suggested the Americans might want to reconsider their choice of mount. British pilots, with their characteristic dry wit, even quipped that the most effective evasive maneuver in a P-47 was to unstrap and sprint laps around its surprisingly roomy cockpit. But an insidious truth was suddenly unfolding in those initial encounters, a truth that German intelligence, blinded by early successes, utterly failed to grasp. The P-47s that were ultimately shot down had absorbed an astonishing, almost unbelievable amount of punishment before succumbing. One particular aircraft, limping back from a May 4th mission, bore the grotesque scars of 21 cannon holes and over 100 machine gun strikes, damage that would have utterly disintegrated any Messerschmitt or Spitfire. The massive, air-cooled radial engine, devoid of vulnerable coolant systems, simply shrugged off hits that would have instantly silenced a liquid-cooled fighter. More significantly, when the P-47s did manage to bring their formidable guns to bear, the results were nothing short of catastrophic. The Thunderbolt's meticulously aligned battery of weapons created a convergence zone of absolute destruction, an experience utterly alien to German pilots. Unlike the rifle-caliber weapons of early warfighters, or the cannon with their woefully limited ammunition, the American fighter could sustain a torrent of fire for over 30 seconds, an eternity in the blink-and-you-miss-it world of aerial combat. The pivotal event that would irrevocably shatter German perceptions occurred on June 26, 1943, high above Lille, France. It involved Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron, and an encounter that would rapidly calcify into legend on both sides of the conflict. Johnson's formation of 48 P-47s was making its way home from a bomber escort mission when they were savagely bounced by 16 Focke-Wulf 190s from 2 ID Jagdgeschwader 26, led by Hauptmann Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, the younger brother of the renowned Adolf Galland. The Germans executed a textbook-perfect attack, plummeting from the blinding sun with a crushing speed advantage. Johnson's Thunderbolt, bringing up the rear of the formation, was instantly engulfed in the brutal crossfire of multiple attackers, sustaining catastrophic damage within the first terrifying seconds of combat.
21 20mm cannon shells ripped and exploded across his aircraft. The canopy imploded, hydraulic fluid erupted in a corrosive spray across the cockpit. The engine cowling was violently torn away, and fire bloomed ominously behind the instrument panel. Johnson, his nose and leg bleeding profusely from shrapnel and bullet fragments, desperately attempted to bail out, only to discover his canopy was hopelessly jammed. A 20mm shell, with grim precision, had detonated in the canopy track, welding it inextricably shut. He was trapped, a living prisoner in a dying aircraft at 27,000 feet. What transpired next utterly defied every conceivable assumption about combat damage tolerance and the limits of aeronautical engineering. Despite having zero forward visibility through the oil-streaked windscreen, a barely functioning engine that shuddered with terrifying violence, and controls that responded only intermittently, Johnson miraculously managed to level the stricken aircraft and, with a grim determination, point its shattered nose towards England. The P-47, a mangled wreck, continued to fly with damage that would have unequivocally reduced any other fighter to a shower of tumbling debris. Then, incredibly, the situation worsened. A lone Focke-Wulf 190, piloted by an unknown airman from II/JG-26, historical research has never definitively identified him, though several names have been put forth based on fragmentary German combat reports from that day, discovered the crippled Thunderbolt, limping desperately towards the English Channel at a pathetic speed of less than 170 miles per hour. What followed was one of the most extraordinary and harrowing encounters in the annals of aerial warfare history. The German pilot meticulously positioned himself directly behind Johnson's battered P-47 and opened fire, unleashing the full fury of his 4 20mm cannons and 2 13mm machine guns. Johnson, utterly incapable of evasive action, could only huddle behind his armor plate, offering up silent prayers.
The Thunderbolt, a testament to its brutal resilience, absorbed the entirety of the Focke-Wulf's cannon ammunition load. Then, the German repositioned, pulling alongside Johnson and fired again, this time with only his machine guns, his cannon barrels now silent and empty. The German pilot then pulled alongside the American, staring in sheer disbelief at the flying wreck. Johnson could clearly discern the pilot's face, young, blond, his expression morphing from initial confidence to utter confusion, then to something approaching genuine fear. The German repositioned once more and emptied his remaining machine gun ammunition into the unyielding Thunderbolt. Still it flew. He pulled alongside again, shook his head in apparent baffled amazement, offered an informal salute, and then, presumably out of all ammunition, peeled away. Johnson's P-47 finally touched down at Manston, its engine failing catastrophically on the runway itself. The crew chief, attempting to catalog the damage, ceased counting bullet holes after reaching an astonishing 200. One 20mm cannon shell had exploded mere inches from Johnson's head. Another had detonated against the formidable armor-plate directly behind his seat. The engine had sustained multiple direct hits. The control cables were partially severed. 3 of the 4 main longerons, the very structural backbone of the fuselage, were shot clean through. Yes, the aircraft had, against all odds, brought him home. The sheer impossible survival of Johnson's aircraft sent profound shock waves through both air forces. American engineers, meticulously studying the wreckage, realized with dawning awe that they had woefully underestimated their own creation. German intelligence, upon receiving combat reports from II/JG-26 detailing the encounter, initially refused to believe such an absurdity. No aircraft, they insisted, could possibly absorb that much punishment and remain airborne. Yet the corroborating testimony from multiple pilots confirmed the impossible truth. The Thunderbolt had absorbed everything the Luftwaffe's premier fighter could deliver and had, miraculously, survived.
By July 1943, American pilots, through relentless trial and error, were finally beginning to unlock and exploit the P-47's true, hidden strengths. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemke, the sagacious commander of the 56th Fighter Group, had through brutal experience stumbled upon the fundamental secret. Don't turn with them. Don't climb with them at low altitude. Use your weight, use your power, use your guns. The Thunderbolt's immense weight, initially perceived as a crippling disadvantage, was now recognized as a formidable weapon. In a dive, absolutely nothing in the German arsenal could catch it. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 could hurtle earthward at an astonishing 550 miles per hour, a speed unsurpassed by any German fighter, even in a vertical dive. This raw, untamed speed could then be miraculously converted into altitude in a breathtaking zoom climb that left any pursuing German fighters helplessly trailing in its wake. Captain Walker Bard Mahoran, who would quickly become one of the first American aces in Europe, refined what would become known as the boom and zoom tactic, though his pilots, with characteristic gallows humor, simply dubbed it the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. Instead of engaging in the traditional intricate dance of dogfights, P-47 formations would relentlessly climb to a commanding 30,000 feet, an altitude well beyond where German fighters could effectively operate. When Luftwaffe fighters foolishly appeared below, the Thunderbolts would roll inverted and plummet earthward in a terrifying dive, achieving speeds that rendered deflection shooting an impossible feat for the defending Germans. At the apex of these devastating dives, the American heavy machine guns would unleash their terrible symphony of destruction. German pilots, who miraculously survived these encounters, described it as facing an inescapable wall of lead, the combined firepower creating an impenetrable zone of devastation. Aircraft caught within this fearsome convergence pattern did not merely fall, they utterly disintegrated. The true, horrifying revelation of American firepower reached its crescendo during the dual raids on Schweinfurt and Regensburg on August 17, 1943, the deepest penetration into Germany attempted by Allied bombers to that date.
This audacious mission would starkly demonstrate both the P-47's limitations, primarily its still restricted range even with external drop tanks, and its utterly terrifying effectiveness when employed with proper tactical acumen. Major David Schilling, leading the 62nd Fighter Squadron, encountered a formation of Messerschmitt 110 destroyer aircraft, specialized bomber killers heavily armed with potent cannon and rocket armament, maneuvering to attack the vulnerable B-17s. The twin-engine German fighters, while heavily armed, were inherently less maneuverable. Schilling's flight of 4 Thunderbolts rolled into their attack dive from a commanding 28,000 feet. Unteroffizier Heinrich Roth, a gunner in one of the Me-110s who miraculously survived the brutal encounter, later recounted in a chilling POW interrogation. The American fighters came down like hammers from heaven. I opened fire at 800 meters. Good hits. I saw them strike the fighter's wing. The P-47 didn't even wobble. Then he fired. The aircraft ahead of us simply came apart. Not shot down, destroyed. Wings separated from the fuselage, tails severed, the crew compartment shredded into metal confetti. In 2 seconds, an Me-110 became nothing. 8 Messerschmitt 110s were annihilated in less than a minute. The German pilots had never in their wildest nightmares experienced such concentrated, annihilating firepower.
Each P-47, a flying ammunition depot, carried 425 rounds per gun, totaling a staggering 3,400 rounds, weighing nearly 900 pounds. At the chosen convergence distance, typically set at 300 yards, the ballistic paths of all 8 guns precisely intersected in a zone roughly 6 feet in diameter. Anything unlucky enough to be caught in that zone faced a relentless torrent of 150 caliber projectiles per second, each traveling at an incredible 2,900 feet per second. The ammunition itself was a testament to the sheer ingenuity and industrial might of America. While German fighters struggled with their paltry, limited cannon ammunition loads, typically a mere 120 to 200 rounds for a 20mm weapon, American pilots could maintain a devastating sustained fire for over half a minute, an eternity in the lightning-fast realm of aerial combat. The standard combat load was a meticulously engineered cocktail blending armor-piercing incendiary tracer, and standard ball ammunition in precise patterns designed to both physically destroy and spectacularly ignite targets. Lieutenant Colonel Francis "Gabby" Gabreski, who would ascend to become the top American ace in Europe with 28 victories, graphically described the cataclysmic effect. When you hit them with all 8, they don't just go down, they explode. I saw 109 literally cut in half, the tail falling one way, the nose and wings another. The pilot never knew what hit him. By September 1943, the Luftwaffe was confronting another horrifying reality about the P-47. Its performance dramatically improved with altitude, while German fighters, by stark contrast, suffered a debilitating decline with altitude. The turbo-supercharged double Wasp engine miraculously maintained its rated power output up to an astonishing 30,000 feet. German fighters, relying on less sophisticated single-stage or two-stage mechanical superchargers, experienced a significant degradation in performance above 25,000 feet. Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most successful aces with a staggering 206 victories, encountered this brutal reality fatally on October 8, 1943. Leading Jagdgeschwader 1 against a formation of B-17s at 28,000 feet over Bremen, Philipp found his Focke-Wulf 190 A6 sluggish, unresponsive, and struggling for control in the thin, unforgiving air. The powerful BMW 801 engine, a marvel at medium altitudes, was now desperately gasping for oxygen nearly 6 miles above the Earth. When P-47s of the 56th Fighter Group plunged onto his formation from a commanding 32,000 feet, the German fighters were, quite literally, sitting ducks. Robert Johnson, now a seasoned combat pilot on his relentless climb to ace status, was flying at 31,000 feet when he spotted Phillips' distinctive Focke-Wulf, recognizable by its elaborate nose art. Johnson's combat report was chillingly clinical. Open fire at 300 yards, 30-degree deflection, observed strikes along entire fuselage. Enemy aircraft exploded, no parachute observed. Phillips' sudden and violent death sent profound shockwaves throughout the beleaguered Luftwaffe. If one of their absolute best, a man who had miraculously survived over 500 combat missions on both the brutal eastern and western fronts, could not survive an encounter against the Thunderbolts, what conceivable chance did average, less experienced pilots have? The German High Command, seized by a growing sense of dread, ordered an immediate and comprehensive investigation into the P-47's capabilities. The report, delivered to Reich Marshal Hermann Göring in November 1943, was a sobering, almost despairing document. The Thunderbolt's service ceiling, it confirmed, exceeded a staggering 42,000 feet, an altitude utterly unreachable by any German fighter. Its dive speed approached the sound barrier, flirting with the very limits of physics. Its formidable armor suite included a 3/8-inch steel plate behind the pilot, a half-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, and intricately designed armored deflection plates around the engine. Most disturbingly, its rugged, over-engineered construction allowed it to absorb damage that would unequivocally destroy 3 conventional fighters and still, miraculously, return home.
In January 1944, a new, even more potent variant of the P-47 began to arrive in England, a machine that would complete its terrifying transformation from a derided laughingstock to a bona fide nightmare. The P-47 D-22 featured a Hamilton standard hydromatic propeller with revolutionary paddle blades, a colossal 13 feet in diameter with broad chord blades that bit into the air like massive voracious oars. The improvement in climb rate was both immediate and dramatic. Where earlier Thunderbolts had struggled with an anemic climb rate of 2,200 feet per minute at sea level, the paddle blade variants could now achieve a blistering 3,000 feet per minute, matching or even exceeding German fighters at most altitudes. The massive propeller also significantly enhanced acceleration, allowing P-47s to build energy faster in level flight, making them even more formidable adversaries. Hauptmann Heinz Knoke of Jagdgeschwader 11, a battle-hardened veteran boasting over 200 combat missions, encountered these new, fearsome variants in February 1944 during a bomber interception near Hanover. He meticulously recorded his stunned observations in his combat diary. "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We bounced a formation near Hanover expecting our usual advantage. Instead, they turned into us and climbed with us, matching our every move. When we tried to disengage, they relentlessly followed us up to 30,000 feet. Schmitt was caught and blown apart, nothing left but smoke and fragments. These are not the same machines we laughed at last year." The paddle blade propeller did more than merely enhance performance. It fundamentally altered the very sound of the Thunderbolt. The distinctive thundering roar created by the blade tips, often reaching supersonic speeds, could be heard from miles away, a deep and ominous growl. German ground troops reported being able to identify approaching P-47s by sound alone, a deep guttural rumble that invariably signaled death from above. They began with a growing sense of dread to call it Donnerschlag, or thunderclap. By March 1944, P-47s, now equipped with external fuel tanks, possessed the crucial range to escort bombers deep into the heart of Germany. The standard configuration carried 2 108-gallon wing tanks or a 75-gallon belly tank, extending their operational range to an impressive 1,000 miles. With the paddle blade propeller delivering vastly improved performance even when fully loaded, Thunderbolts could now engage in combat on equal terms immediately after jettisoning their empty tanks. The Luftwaffe's desperate response was to concentrate their dwindling resources on attacking the bombers,
fervently hoping to inflict enough losses to halt the relentless American daylight campaign. But this grim strategy necessitated flying directly through the P-47 escort screen, an increasingly suicidal proposition. German pilots, through bitter experience, developed a grudging respect that quickly bordered on outright fear for the big American fighters. Major Günther Röhl, of one of Germany's absolute top aces, with an incredible 275 victories, mostly achieved on the brutal Eastern Front, miraculously survived a harrowing encounter with P-47s on March 6, 1944, though he was left severely wounded. He later recalled in a post-war interview, his voice tinged with a lingering dread. "We saw them above us, fat silhouettes against the blinding sun. Someone laughed and said, 'Here come the flying pigs.' Nobody was laughing 30 seconds later. They came down like an avalanche, faster than we could react, faster than we could even comprehend. The first pass destroyed 3 of our fighters. They were just gone, utterly transformed into burning debris. Their guns didn't fire in bursts like ours. They poured out solid, unbroken streams of fire. Getting caught in that stream meant instant, inescapable death."
The long-range escort missions unveiled yet another profound P-47 advantage, its incredible endurance. While German fighters operated at maximum power settings that voraciously consumed fuel, the big American radials could cruise with remarkable efficiency at high altitude. Thunderbolts could remain with the bombers for hours on end, rotating top cover while meticulously conserving enough fuel for both sustained combat and a safe return to base. As more P-51 Mustangs arrived to assume the mantle of long-range escort duties in the spring of 1944, P-47 units increasingly pivoted their focus towards ground attack, a role that would ultimately cement their terrifying reputation as the most feared aircraft in the German arsenal. The transition to ground attack began in earnest in April 1944, as the Allies meticulously prepared for the monumental invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's heavy machine gun battery proved equally devastating against ground targets. The standard armor-piercing incendiary ammunition could easily penetrate the top armor of most German vehicles, while the sheer, overwhelming volume of fire could utterly annihilate soft targets in mere seconds. A 2-second burst, delivered with brutal precision, unleashed 160 .50 caliber projectiles into a target area the size of a truck. But it was the addition of bombs and rockets that truly transformed the P-47 into a veritable multi-role monster. The D-25 variant could carry 2 1,000-pound bombs nestled under its wings and a formidable 500-pounder under the fuselage, a bomb load equivalent to early war medium bombers. Later variants ingeniously incorporated zero-length rocket stubs for 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, HVARs, each packing the destructive punch of a 105mm artillery shell. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the brutal Normandy campaign, experienced P-47 ground attacks firsthand, a memory that would forever haunt him. They came in low, so low you could see the pilots' faces. The sound was terrifying, engines roaring, rockets screaming, then the sickening, relentless hammer of those heavy machine guns. A column of our trucks simply ceased to exist. 20 vehicles transformed into burning wreckage in one pass. The psychological effect on the men was utterly devastating. They called them jabos, fighter bombers, but these were something beyond that. They were flying artillery with the accuracy of snipers. On June 6, 1944, D-Day, the Luftwaffe, in a final horrifying realization, discovered just how completely the balance of power had irrevocably shifted. Over 500 P-47s provided an unbreachable canopy of air cover for the invasion forces, creating an impenetrable umbrella over the vulnerable beaches. German fighters desperately attempting to reach the landing zones were simply massacred. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of Jagdgeschwader II, one of only 3 German pilots to miraculously reach the beaches that day, reported with a tone of utter despair. "The sky belonged to the Americans. Thunderbolts were stacked from sea level to 30,000 feet. We tried to break through at dawn, 12 fighters from our Gruppe. I was the only one to return. The P-47s were waiting at every altitude. You couldn't climb over them, couldn't dive under them. Their guns turned our fighters into aluminum rain.
In the harrowing weeks following D-Day, P-47 systematically, relentlessly, and with brutal efficiency destroyed German movement during daylight hours. The statistics were truly staggering. In June alone, 9th Air Force Thunderbolts claimed an astonishing 651 locomotives, 3,847 trucks, 512 tanks and armored vehicles, and 4,553 horse-drawn vehicles destroyed. The Wehrmacht was forced to move exclusively at night, severely crippling their ability to respond effectively to the rapid Allied advances. The Germans desperately tried everything to counter the overwhelming Thunderbolt threat. They reinforced vehicle armor, deployed more anti-aircraft guns, developed new, more intricate camouflage techniques. Nothing worked. The P-47's lethal combination of speed, robust armor, and overwhelming firepower rendered them virtually unstoppable. Even the dreaded 88mm flak gun struggled to effectively track the fast-moving fighters at low altitude. While devastating the European battlefield, the P-47 was simultaneously proving its immense worth in the unforgiving Pacific theater. The 348th Fighter Group, operating from the sweltering jungles of New Guinea, discovered that the Thunderbolt's inherent qualities, its long range, durability, and raw power, were perfectly suited to the vast distances and harsh, often brutal conditions of the Pacific War. Colonel Neil Kirby, commanding the 348th, meticulously developed tactics specifically tailored for the unique challenges of the Pacific War. On October 11, 1943, Kirby, demonstrating audacious bravery, led 4 P-47s against a formidable force of 40 Japanese aircraft over Wewak, personally shooting down 6 enemy planes in a single heroic mission, an act that earned him the Medal of Honor. The Japanese, accustomed to engaging nimble but fragile American fighters, were utterly unprepared for the P-47's unprecedented combination of devastating firepower and unparalleled durability. Japanese ace Saburo Sakai, who encountered P-47s over New Guinea, later penned a chilling account. We called them monsters. Our 20mm cannon, which could utterly destroy a P-40 with a few well-placed hits, seemed to have absolutely no effect. I put dozens of rounds into one Thunderbolt and watched it simply fly away. Their return fire was terrifying, streams of heavy bullets that tore aircraft apart. The P-47N, a specialized variant developed specifically for the immense distances of the Pacific, featured significantly increased fuel capacity, with innovative wet wings holding 93 gallons each, extending its operational range to an astonishing 2,350 miles. This ultimate variant would ultimately escort B-29s all the way to the Japanese home islands, definitively proving that the short-legged fighter of 1943 had, through relentless evolution, transformed into a true, long-range strategic weapon. Perhaps the ultimate vindication of the P-47's incredible evolution came in its harrowing encounters with Germany's revolutionary jet fighters. The Messerschmitt Me-262, with its blistering 540-mile-per-hour top speed, should have been utterly untouchable by propeller-driven fighters. Yet cunning P-47 pilots quickly discovered they could intercept and destroy jets in 2 specific situations: during takeoff and landing, when the jets were at their most vulnerable, and in high-speed dives from extreme altitude. On November 27, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel John C. Meyer of the 352nd Fighter Group achieved a historic first, becoming one of the initial pilots to shoot down an Me-262 with a P-47. Diving from a commanding 28,000 feet, Meyer's Thunderbolt reached speeds approaching 500 miles per hour, fast enough to catch the jet in level flight. The unsuspecting jet pilot, supremely confident in his overwhelming speed advantage, never even saw the diving P-47 until Meyer's guns erupted at 400 yards. Meyer's combat report, delivered with his characteristic understatement, simply noted, "The enemy aircraft disintegrated under fire. Large pieces, including both engines, separated from the fuselage. The pilot did not escape." The concentrated fire of 8.5 caliber guns proved more effective than we anticipated against jet aircraft.
By early 1945, specialized P-47M variants were specifically deployed to counter the burgeoning threat of German jets and the terrifying V-1 flying bombs. With water methanol injection boosting power to a staggering 2,800 horsepower and refined aerodynamics, these ultimate Thunderbolts could achieve an astonishing 470 miles per hour in level flight at 30,000 feet, fast enough to intercept even jets under certain, carefully selected conditions. Major George Bostwick, commanding the 63rd Fighter Squadron equipped with P-47Ms, shot down 2 Me-262s in March 1945. His tactical report emphatically underscored firepower over raw speed. "The jets are faster, but they can't turn and they can't take punishment. One good burst from our battery and they come apart like they're made of paper. They have to slow down to attack bombers. That's when we get them." The ultimate, horrifying demonstration of overwhelming American industrial might came during Operation Bodenplatte, the Luftwaffe's desperate last-ditch attempt to cripple Allied air power on January 1, 1945. Nearly 900 German fighters, deploying their best remaining pilots, launched surprise attacks on Allied airfields across Belgium and the Netherlands. At Y-34 Airfield near Metz, home to the 365th Fighter Group's P-47s, the attack initially achieved a devastating success. German fighters annihilated 22 Thunderbolts on the ground, along with several other aircraft. A captured German pilot, brought to the command post, pointed at the burning aircraft and with a smirk taunted, "What do you think of that?" Major George Brooking's legendary response reverberated throughout the 9th Air Force. He simply pointed to the flight line, where ground crews were already, with grim efficiency, pushing damaged aircraft aside and preparing hard stands for fresh replacements. "By tomorrow, we'll have 40 new ones. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" The German pilot's smirk, Brooking recalled, evaporated instantly. Within a mere 48 hours, factory-fresh P-47 D-40s filled the flight line, flown directly from sprawling depots in England. The Luftwaffe, in its doomed Bodenplatte offensive, suffered catastrophic losses: 271 aircraft and 213 irreplaceable pilots, including many highly experienced instructors and squadron leaders. These losses, in the dying days of the war, they could never replace. The Americans, by contrast, lost 134 aircraft total across all attacked airfields, every single one replaced within a week. The stark, brutal numbers told a grim story of inevitable, crushing defeat. Republic Aviation, a marvel of wartime production, churned out a staggering 15,683 P-47s during the war, more than any other American fighter. At the peak of production, the Farmingdale factory on Long Island completed one Thunderbolt every single hour around the clock. The Evansville plant in Indiana, built from empty farmland in 1942, was producing an astonishing 500 aircraft per month by 1944. Each P-47D, a complex symphony of engineering, required 65,000 individual parts, 8 miles of electrical wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber. The engine alone contained 2,400 individual components, each meticulously machined to tolerances of 1,000th of an inch. Yet American workers, many of them women who had never even seen an aircraft before Pearl Harbor, assembled these incredibly complex machines with a precision that often exceeded peacetime standards. The scale of ammunition production was equally staggering, almost incomprehensible. Each P-47 sortie required a minimum of 3,400 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition. With hundreds of Thunderbolts flying daily, ceaseless missions, ammunition consumption surged to over 10 million rounds per month by mid-1944. The sprawling Lake City Arsenal in Missouri, just one of several ammunition plants, produced an astonishing 30 million rounds monthly. Each cartridge, a tiny masterpiece of precision, was manufactured to tolerances measured in 10,000ths of an inch, ensuring utterly reliable feeding through the synchronized gun mechanisms. The fuel consumption was simply enormous. Each Thunderbolt devoured 100 gallons per hour in normal flight, escalating to a colossal 300 gallons per hour in intense combat with water injection engaged. The 9th Air Force alone, a voracious beast of consumption, swallowed over 25 million gallons of aviation fuel monthly by late 1944. Every drop of it meticulously shipped across the treacherous Atlantic in tankers that were themselves a testament to American mass production. Even more impressively than the sheer volume of aircraft production was the meticulously orchestrated pilot training program. By 1944, the United States was graduating an astonishing 30,000 pilots annually from advanced training, a number greater than Germany had trained in the entirety of the war. Each P-47 pilot received